Alright, so we are now nearing the end of the FM24 Early Access period, so it's time to take a look at what's new in the world of international management. So let's start with those two new features that were announced related to international management, an improved national pool and the national squad planner. So we're going to start here with a save I set up with Venezuela, which may well be making its way onto the channel soon, so make sure you're subscribed for that. And we'll start with the squad planner. Now, in terms of national management, I've actually found this to be a very useful tool. So here we get an overview not only of the players currently in your squad, but the players who could be under consideration. We can easily switch between different formations that you've got set up, and you can also click on the individual positions to get a breakdown. So if we look at the right side of our attacking midfield, for example, we see here our top 3 options according to the assistant manager, and as we scroll down we see some other younger players that might be under consideration. Look at this David Martinez, for example, with that potential. Definitely one to start bringing into the international fold. Speaking of future selection, we can of course come up here and we can plan for the years ahead. One thing I really like here is it lists the competition. So we see in 2024, it reminds us that we're going to have the Copa America coming up. In 2026, the World Cup, if we can qualify for it. Now, if we look at the striker role, you can see this is one of the weaker areas of the team. We get that with the 2.5 star rating on the position. We've only really got Joseph Martinez here who's suitable as a first team player. If I just fade my camera out for a moment, what's this down here? The option to add in players from the national pool. So if we click on that, we get this little pop-up screen now. Again, there's nobody with the current ability to come in, but we do see here we've got a player, Kevin Kelsey at Shakhtar, and we've got a couple of players here at Caracas in the Venezuelan league who could be useful additions to the squad. So I'm going to add those top 4 in. They've all got high potential. And then, of course, we can move them up. It doesn't affect happiness. They won't know about this ranking, of course. Okay, we've got the message now. But yeah, the great thing about this is then if we get a national pool report for a youngster, an up-and-coming youngster, I'm not going to forget about them. Now, one small gripe, one thing where I thought this would be useful is I've had this problem in the past where a squad player gets injured. You don't pick them for the squad, and then you don't have another international window for several months, and you kind of forget they exist. And then you get the angry news item, why didn't you pick me, and so on. So I was hoping here I would be able to keep any injured players in my squad planner and therefore keep them in my mind. And this guy is my first choice keeper, and he's currently out injured. Now, I know it's a serious injury and he's going to be out for a very long time, but surely I could put him in the squad planner for 2025. I mean, isn't that the point? So now on to the national pool, the other thing that we were told had been revamped. Now, at first glance, it looks very similar. One thing that is different though, staff advice. So we see in this column, you just get that note about who the coaching team thinks should be called up and who should be dropped. And we've got the option to follow up on that advice right here. So yeah, previously you would have all this information in separate email messages, and there'd be a bit of back and forth between the national pool and the messages to make sure everything was right. So it's good to have it all compactly displayed in one space. Now, if we click on the position tab here, I mean, it looks a lot like the squad planner, doesn't it? We don't have the kind of positional ratings here. Now, I found this to be very useful when picking the squad, because you see I've got a list of every goalkeeper in my national pool, including that goalkeeper we just looked at who's out with the long-term injury. So I can have a look at here. I've got the advice from my staff. I've got the ratings for each position, and then as we click through defensive midfield, attacking midfield, striker, all of those, we can see we get it for every position in the game. So in terms of selecting who I want to be in the team, yeah, it's definitely streamlined that process. And then from this tab up at the top, we can get an overview of all the reports that our coaching staff and our scouts have logged going around various leagues around the world and watching our players in action. So overall, I would say the national team planner and the revamps to the national pool, I mean, they are useful tweaks, but not exactly groundbreaking additions. And let's be honest, we still need international training now, don't we? So we switched over now to my Vent4A Kofu save because, of course, this is one of the big additions to this year's game, the J-League. So finally, we've got these in the base game. We've got all the clubs. We've got all the licensed players. We've got J-Leagues 1, 2 and 3. But when we come over to the Japanese national team, much like the German national team, it remains greyed out. Now, of course, we know there are fixes to this German and Japanese national team problem. Expect a video on that fix shortly after the full release. But once that fix is applied, the good news is, of course, for the Japan team, we now have the J-League players. So Nagatomo, for example, will be selectable, whereas in the past you had to rely on Japanese stars based outside Japan. And the last thing for us to have a look at is tournaments. I mean, in terms of the actual tournaments featured in the game, there's nothing new this year, sadly, but we have had some format changes. Take the World Cup, for example. Now here, I'm looking at a file where I've simmed ahead 10 years, and we see now the World Cup, it's got 48 teams, but no groups of 3, like we had in the last couple of versions of FM. This is the 12 groups of 4, and then the monstrous knockout round of 32. I mean, personally, I still prefer the 32-team version of the World Cup, but at least this is up to date. Okay, so I've gone back to my 2023 save file here. International management fans amongst you will know we've got 2 major tournaments coming up in January of 2024. So we've got the Asian Cup, which will be hosted in Qatar, and the African Cup of Nations hosted in Côte d'Ivoire. And the good news is for both tournaments, SI have implemented the actual groups that have been drawn. So if you want to have a realistic playthrough for these, you can. Now skip ahead to the summer of 2024, because also updated to reflect real-life changes is the Copa America. So this will be hosted in the USA. It will feature 16 nations, so all 10 nations from CONMEBOL, plus 6 qualifiers from the CONCACAF region. Now, the 6 CONCACAF nations qualify through the North American Nations League, which has also been revamped to reflect the new real-life system. So Division C now only has 9 teams in 3 groups of 3. Division B is still 4 groups of 4, and this is where it gets complicated. Division A has 16 teams, 12 of them go into 2 groups of 6, but they only play 4 matches. It's another kind of Swiss system. So the top 2 from each group go to the quarter-final, where there will also be the 4 top ranked teams, basically USA, Mexico, and I imagine most times Canada are going to be guaranteed a slot here. And the 4 teams that win through to the semi-final, those are 4 of the 6 that will qualify for the Copa America. And then the 4 losing quarter-finalists, they go into this new Copa America playoff. So it's straightforward, just 2 matches with the 2 winners going to the tournaments. Now that's all great, but where we hit an issue is the Gold Cup qualification. Now those of you who watched my Guadeloupe series in the summer will know that in FM23 that was a bit bugged. So teams who should have been in the playoffs weren't being put in the playoffs. Teams who were losing in the playoffs were still going to the tournament proper. Now the good news is here that seems to have been fixed. So the teams who should be qualifying for the playoff are. The winners of the playoff are making it to the tournament. The losers of the playoff are not. Okay, I've now jumped ahead to that 2033 save file. I'm going to cycle back through the Gold Cups that are held every 2 years, and every odd numbered year, of course. And tell me, do you notice something here that's missing? Yes, Canada. Now, if we look here through the schedule, they just do not compete at the Gold Cup for some reason. Even in 2025, when they got through to the Nations League final, they didn't actually make it to the tournament in the summer. And take a look at the 2033 tournament again. There's no USA here even. Now, it's a bit late in the day of the beta at this point, but just a reminder, if you are playing the beta, there is this report bug feature, which I did use to log this. But failing that, you can always head over here to the SI community forums and log your issue, as I did here. Now, looking elsewhere in the world of international tournaments, there are still a few incorrect formats kicking about. This one's really frustrating, but in Asia, the West Asian Federation Championship is still using this 9-team format with just the top teams going into the final, and this despite the announcement 2 years ago now that this tournament would be expanded to 12 teams in 3 groups of 4. Also looking at the South Asian Championship, now they've finally removed Afghanistan from here, who haven't been a member of the South Asian Federation since like 2014. However, in real life, the South Asian Federation have invited other teams to join to make it up to a round number of 8. And also in Asia, despite the fact that the Central Asian Championship took place for the first time this last summer, it's not in the game. I mean, speaking of missing tournaments, the ones that I've made myself in the editor over recent years, like the COSAFA Cup and the CSAFA Cup, the Baltic Cup, the MSG Melanesian Cup in Oceania, the ABCS tournament in the Caribbean. These are tournaments I would love to see in the game, but they're not here. I will, of course, be working on those add-on files as soon as the Football Manager editor is available. Don't forget, if you sign up as a channel member, you can get early access to those tournament files. In the meantime, you can check out this suggested video for some of my other Football Manager International exploits. And by the way, I mean exploits in the sense of adventures, not cheats for the game.